Before I can even get started with the video, I have to say thank you for everyone who engaged in the comments on the last video, both positively and negatively. I could literally talk about martial arts action and this franchise as a whole for hours, and with some of you, I kinda did. Also, shoutouts to my homie at Ice Cream Guru for the best actually I've ever received, as well as Lunu1991 for successfully predicting that I was gonna have a field day with Suki's action in this episode. Speaking of which, this brings me to Netflix's Avatar Episode 2, Warriors. One of the most cherished episodes of the original series that not only solidified the iconic martial arts action sequences that would come to define this franchise, but also introduced fans worldwide, see what I did there, to the idea that non-benders could kick the off any bender that was caught slipping. I hope you're all ready to get into it because now it is time to bow in and see if the Kyoshi Warriors have preserved their martial arts heritage. If you've seen the episode, then you know we can't even begin to touch on any of that without talking about Zuko's wonderful room trashing scene. Now, it may not be as potent as Kane or Yso's, but it's still a pretty good fit if you ask me.
Everybody betrayed me.
In all honesty, I only brought this up because I still really like Iroh in this series.
You probably just misplaced it.
I think Mr. Lee here is doing a great job so far, and even if I don't get enough martial arts teaching compared to the original,
power in firebending comes from the breath, not the muscles.
At least whenever he shows up, he doesn't need fire to brighten the scene, you know what I mean?
I'm sure it'll turn up.
Following that lovely little moment, we go straight to the Netflix gang where they are bringing up Avatar Kyoshi, and I'm actually glad they did because this highlights something from the previous episode. The only reason why I thought it was lame when Zuko brought her up in episode 1 is because of how out of nowhere it was. That's what made it fan servicey, and let's be honest, if he's seen Kyoshi, why wouldn't he also have seen and mentioned Roku instead? However, Aang bringing her up now is perfect because she's relevant to the immediate situation and is being used to move the plot forward. Context matters, you know what I mean? Next, we get a quick argument between Sokka and Katara, and I'm not gonna lie, this is still a pretty weak take on our boy here. However, I think if they play up Katara sticking with Aang for the selfish motivation of getting better at waterbending, then this could actually be a pretty unique take on her.
This scroll has been passed down among the waterbenders of our tribe for generations.
And I'm sure a bunch of y'all knew I was going to mention this, but I really loved the original waterbending scroll episode. But I understand getting rid of that episode's plot for the sake of keeping up the pace. It's just an unfortunate loss when it comes to readapting the show. Let me make it crystal clear, this is seriously just a nitpick, and not indicative of the overall quality of the episode. Because I also really appreciate the funeral here, even if the acting didn't quite carry it. Not saying Gordon is a bad actor at all, just suggesting I think they should have leaned more into his strong points. He's infinitely better at the kid moments than he is trying to sell the dramatic beats. But it's been entirely too long since I've talked about an action sequence, and wouldn't you know it, that brings us right to the Kyoshi ambush, and do I have to say it?
Do it.
Do any of you remember how the original Kyoshi ambush went? Because I sure as hell didn't. That was so cool on like 5 different levels, man, and I genuinely can't explain the depths of how badly the Netflix version was executed without going into why the original was so big energy. It almost got me pregnant. For starters, they all drop in like a squad of ninjas, and the first shot we got was of Sokka reaching for his weapon. So not only did he react quick because this character has been established as relatively on guard, but he is also proactive, which only makes it better that the first thing we see the Kyoshi Warriors do on screen is subdue the most obvious threat first, aka the guy reaching for his weapon. Then because Katara is looking elsewhere, another warrior pulls the hood over her eyes and captures her, which then gets Aang to pay attention to Katara, distracting him and letting yet another Lady of War take him down. Finally, we get one more arm reaching in and subduing Momo without injuring him, and this is all accomplished in 11 seconds, but more importantly, only 5 cuts. This little scuffle wasn't supposed to be a big grand spectacle, right? It was intended to highlight the Kyoshi Warriors' efficiency as a group, while the panning camera, as well as pulling in close on the characters, gives the audience the subtle conditioning that they're being disoriented and constrained. No movement is wasted here. There is no intimidation factor. It's quick, and the conscious choice to stay close to the characters is a deliberate decision by the directing forces in an attempt to send a message to the audience. Bro, the Netflix version is literally broken in comparison. First, I'm gonna play the whole sequence for you at double speed just so that you can see everything I'm about to go over real quick. So go ahead and set the YouTube playback to 0.5 times speed so that the scene plays out as normal. Ready? Go! No joke, this scene actually needs reshoots. And I'm not saying that to like put them down or anything. It happens in plenty of movies. But somebody needed to step in and say, we kinda need to redo this. Let's start with the establishing shot. That's right, it's so jank, I have to actually talk about the blocking of actors in the scene before we can even touch the choreography. Alright, let's just get into this. For one thing, we just had an establishing shot showing how far away they are from the actual tree line. Aang and Katara are over here, right? They are facing their backs to the ocean, both of them. Yet the Kyoshi Warriors are hiding in the trees. However, when we cut back to Katara, not only is one of the warriors just magically there, but she's been moved forward because now the tree line is directly on her side. When it literally could not have been. But it gets better, because we get a whopping 7 cuts in 4.5 seconds. And Aang's backflip isn't even oriented the right direction. He starts out over here, but when he lands, he's facing the wrong way. Quick question. How the f was that supposed to work? I can't be the only one who noticed how sloppily edited this was, right? And the cherry atop this ass sundae is Suki's poorly done Morote Seonage. Let me just clarify that this is also the highlight of the sequence for me, even if it's not performed to the highest level. It's just made rough because the scene in front of it is so badly done, and the show it is reimagining is famous for its martial art accuracy. The very last thing I'm going to say about it is that because of the methods they used for nabbing Katara and Sokka, and because Aang doesn't get captured himself, it makes these Kyoshi Warriors seem like they are actually less competent than their animated counterparts. Which is an important thing to note when looking at how much they whoop the firebenders' asses at the end. Spoilers, from here we move on with the story, get some more exposition, and let me just add that it's a good thing I've accepted these characters are not the same ones as the animated versions, or I might be more than annoyed at the huge chip on Suki's shoulder here. However, I get it. The original episode was more focused on Sokka's sexism.
Sorry, ladies, didn't mean to interrupt your dance lesson.
And Aang's ego and attempts to impress Katara, while this one is trying to flesh out Suki's motivations more, as well as increasing the overall drama with Aang's mission. They also leaned way more into Sokka and Suki's relationship, so it's gonna be hella awkward when he starts making out with Yue in like 5 episodes.
You probably just misplaced it.
After this moment, we get another fun little back and forth between the Banished Boys and Admiral Zhao, and even if the script lets me down a bit, these three sure as hell don't. After their fun little scene, we get to another highlight that I was just itching to talk about. This is where I can show that just because movements are sloppy, context can still make a sequence work. Katara's waterbending has authentic Tai Chi Chuan in it, and it looks rough because she's an amateur. I love it! This is actually something I think they did as well as the original. Because it's hard enough to animate these movements as it is, right? But it's even harder when you're trying to animate them to be intentionally amateurish without looking choppy.
Work with me here!
This little bit here, though, the impact needed to be a practical shot. Also, good to know that the script is still telling us the characters' personalities. The difference between this scene here and the one at the beginning with Zuko and Iroh is that Iroh is trying to educate Zuko. The descriptions that Iroh is giving are informing the lesson. Here, Katara isn't even debating with Sokka. She just starts popping off about how great Aang is. Although the recurring joke of Suki moving around silently is pretty good, this nonsense with the melons can get the hell out of here. Like this immediately makes people roll their eyes. And it's not because of a girl showing up a boy. Sokka's entire character revolves around him being a goofy, clever punching bag. No, it's always in the delivery that brings the cringe, because the way she threw it here not only looks like she's not even trying, but it makes the director look like he's not even trying too. Then we get to their little hand-to-hand match, and it looks like something Steven Seagal choreographed. Suki's gonna be doing some Aikido here, and even though there are only 2 moves in this little action scene, I want to point out something. The move is fine. It looks like a Katadori headlock transition, Dima, and it's a little slow for my taste, but my issue with this moment is mainly from the character side. As most of the kind souls that have been commenting on my videos are aware of, action needs to be character-driven too. And this just feels kinda mean-spirited from Suki because she grabs Sokka while he's still stretching. She didn't even wait for him to swing like in the original, so I get that she's supposed to be a little awkward sausage here, but it just comes off as feeling wrong, you know? You know what we needed more of though? More Avatar stuff. And you know what? I feel like this is a good statement for the whole show. All of this Kyoshi backstory and what they're choosing to talk about feels like they're focusing on the wrong part of what made the lore interesting originally. However, this little bit of movement from Aang looks nice. It reminds me exactly of the Wushu Daolu competitive Baguazhang form. And you know, I just love going from positive notes to positive notes because this training sequence with the Warriors is beautiful. I adore the tiny little corrections Suki makes alongside her shouting Za. Za! This also gives me a moment to talk about the backstory of the Kyoshi Warriors' fighting inspirations. They have a ton of Japanese roots in their armor and the usage of Tessen as well as Aikido. However, the forms and movements with the fans themselves are distinctly Jeishin Daolu. That is to say, Chinese in origin, and there's a reason for that. That's because the Chinese Jeishun was adopted from the Japanese Tessen first. So this is, in essence, a Japanese weapon that has been adopted for Chinese performance. And it is perfectly replicated here. I'm not sure who was on set this particular day, but they nailed it. And do you see what I'm talking about? When they pull the camera back so you can actually tell what the is happening in the scene? They even got the bow right. And oh my god, they corrected Sokka's hands. I love it. Their form here, however, looks like a mix of various things. Specifically a bit of Shaolin, because I've seen my elder classman and super lawyer extraordinaire practicing it. So I decided to reach out to him to see if he could help me figure out exactly what it was, and lo and behold, I was right. And if you have any time in your day, please go check out @kungfu.esquire over on Instagram. Dagu recently took 4 gold medals at the Phoenix Wushu Championships while having a broken toe. Madman. Also, our Sifu is just insane. Getting back on track though, the form is distinctly Kung Fu inspired, not Aiki. But it's all okay, because at least I can distinctly note when a particular art is being channeled this time instead of the ki blasting from episode 1. And that's what they call foreshadowing. Because almost on cue, the show kicks me square in the nuts with their little sparring insert. It's genuinely not that big of a deal, just kind of a letdown after that nice little choreography in front of it, because all Sokka does is a generic duck under her swing, and you can't even see the sweep of the leg takedown, which is the most important part of the move. They even added a Dutch angle, Jesus Christ. It all wraps up with Suki reversing the full mount, but again, because it's filmed so close, you can't see how she readjusted their foundation in order to reverse the technique.
Not being a bender means we have to be even better than benders.
And right on cue, the Fire Nation begins their attack on Kyoshi Island, just as Aang is beginning his conversation with the big lady herself. And I just want to interject one little thing here. All of this riding on Kyoshi just actively makes me dislike her more, and that sucks because she was one of my favorite characters in the original because she truly felt like she embodied not only the Earth Element's personality, but also the balanced and big picture mindset of the Avatar itself. I don't know who it was that started the whole going full Kyoshi on people, but she was never angry in the original show. You guys remember that, right?
In my day, Qin the Conqueror threatened to throw the world out of balance. I killed Qin the Conqueror. I stopped him, and the world entered a great era of peace. A horrible tyrant, Qin was expanding his army to all corners of the continent.
So shouldn't going full Kyoshi on somebody mean that you just zen the hell out completely and do what needs to be done?
Technically, he fell to his own doom because he was too stubborn to get out of the way.
Personally, I don't really see the difference.
Awesome!
And it feels like everybody just reduces her to an overly aggressive, slightly rude powerhouse.
It's about time.
But I know, it's a different interpretation and that's okay. It just makes me hesitant with how they're gonna handle Toph in the future.
All I know is that while he was talking to us, he was sincere. Maybe you're all just letting your hurt feelings keep you from thinking clearly.
For now though, we gotta go over the Fire Nation's attack on the island, and right away you gotta love the speed up on Mama's throw here. Wait a minute, I'm not sure that's a speed up effect. It looks like it's actually CGI or green screen. She's not even holding on to anything here. This is an effect. Okay, even though the next shot of the battle has an animation blooper where this fireball appears on screen before the firebender even punches it out, I gotta point out that that's still a motherfucking punch. We finally have a firebender throwing a vertical fist, and he's got a pretty nice stance to boot, man. That is some progress, baby. Unfortunately, it's not only ruined with a gross bird's eye view, which I now realize is definitely the director/editor's shortcut to make this more interesting, but this Fire Nation soldier trips before the warrior even sweeps his foot. Guys, you picked the one angle that would make this look as bad as possible. Then we got the Sokka swinging at this dude, and not only does the firebender miss his cue, but the sound effect even plays late. I'll give him this though, the fan throw was timed pretty well, and I can see all of the action. Moving on, Suki's mom has her little moment that looks better thanks to the smoke effects doing their job. And then we get this guy literally shooting a fire blast like it's a Hadouken. Then this section is another continuity error. Ignore that my boy here is charging up the thickest Kamehameha you've ever seen. Look at this next section instead. When Sokka shoves him over, you can barely see what Suki hits him with because of how closed in this camera work is. Then he magically teleports into Sokka's arms as he gets thrown with an admittedly decent Hanegoshi. Even though in the shot right after it, Sokka's club teleports to the inside of the firebender's arm as Suki finishes him off. For real though, how did they let this get through? The last victim of this fight scene is this firebender right here, who not only suffers a 3-hit combo from Sokka, but this team attack from Suki. And that's another bird's eye shot, by the way. I should have been making a counter for these. It ends with another continuity hiccup when this guy spins over with his hand on fire, only to cut to yet another bird's eye view, and he magically appears with his arm at his side. Again, outside of Sokka's throw, where are the martial arts at? Why bother setting up that Suki knows how to use a Tessen and Aikido if you're not going to incorporate it into the fight scenes? Hey audience, do you remember how ruthless and aggressive Zhao used to fight? It was the softest serve I've ever seen. He's literally pushing the fireball. Well, maybe we'll find some martial arts with Zuko and Katara. I will admit, I love that they're still letting Zuko show a bit of mercy here by giving her a warning to get out of the way, and I also like the bits of Tai Chi Chuan flow that they kept with Katara's movements. It's even reinforced by the water attack coming off as wimpy. Of course, that makes these firebenders look like some bitches.
And if you ask me, am I a bitch? A little bit. Catch my drift? Not all the way.
But I appreciate the effort. Side note, this is also why the original show used a lot of people that weren't benders too. Finally, while Zuko isn't using a vertical fist, at least his stance work and posing is strong by comparison to the first episode. My biggest complaint is the wasted movement here. Katara ducks for cover and we see Zuko literally lob one more fireball, but notice that we never get to see where it hits. Well, Zuko straight up burninating Katara is interrupted by Kyoshi's superhero landing. And if anybody wasn't sold on the whole Dragon Ball Z fighting before, just fuck it, right? Who cares? Super Kyoshi flies down to save the warriors, and if anybody was wondering why this shot looked weird, it's because they didn't mask the spherical glow on her eyes properly in post. Then we get like a whiff, a fart if you will, of martial arts inspiration yet again, and it even looks to be sourced from a Bagua Zhang Dalu. But unfortunately, just like episode 1, right when it looks like they're about to start cooking, the time is up. It's pretty fortunate that Zhao decided to retreat because right after this big attack, Aang powers down. And with that being said, we are at the end of the fights for this episode. Okay, I waited until I was completely done with that fight before I brought this up, but good fights should be able to convey a sense of story and character progression without words. That's why it's so important that individuals are also defined by the way they fight and move. Again, I'm not making a point of comparison to the original because it's what it's based off of. I'm making a point of comparison because it is a great example of the fighting nuances done excellently. The original fight against Zuko's team not only used the stealth that the Kyoshi Warriors were established with, but also kept the martial techniques they were using consistent with every other scene we witnessed in the episode. The girls don't have plot armor here because they only succeeded by using stealth. And when they went up against someone that knows what they're doing and they couldn't successfully sneak attack him, they lose. Don't get me wrong, I understand not using stuff like the elephant koi or the unagi or the Komodo rhinos, even though that ultimately means you're unable to use my favorite part of the episode, where Katara used some Chekhov's bending to remove the water out of Aang's lungs. But this particular episode is when we start getting deeper and deeper into that fight style characterization, such as when Zuko hits a virgin flare here. By the way, that move is really hard to do for some reason, and it's gonna suck getting footage of that for this vid. Yeah, this sucks. Yeah, I bet it does. Unfortunately, all of this characterization is still missing, and even though we've improved on a bunch of the problems that I saw in episode 1, it's still missing that core sense of identity. There's also just little pieces of the story that I glossed over, like revealing Ozai early being just a dumb decision. They did that in the Shyamalan movie too, and it received so much hate, I'm actually shocked they did it again. The one saving grace I'm gonna give that choice is that this actor looks the part. As you can tell, I'm not the biggest fan of this episode. There was a little more martial arts representation here, and what we got, I completely loved. But they didn't actually use it in the fight scenes, except for Katara, and she's the novice! However, I think it's important to highlight that this is also Michael Goy's last episode as director for the show. Because of how I reacted to the first episode, I actually went and consumed some of Michael Goy's other filmography, and no hate to the guy, but I was left pretty unimpressed. Regardless of that, I think he had a really tough job by being handed two of the most impactful episodes of Avatar. Although I'd be lying if I didn't say I can't wait to see what another director is capable of. And with all of that being said, thank you again to everybody who bothered to show up last time and comment on the video. I want to also take an opportunity to own up to my gross misinterpretation of Sozin, as well as misreading Aang's gliding as flight. That was completely my bad, and I'll be sure to hold that L. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like and sub down below, but more importantly, make sure to catch me slipping again, and let me know if I missed anything else in the comments below. Regardless of the context, it's always a pleasure to chat with you all, but until next time, I'm bowing out. And I'll see you all in Omashu.